Hello everyone and welcome back. So in today's video we're going to be building this water tower from scratch. It's a procedural model and the idea here is to do it without any VEX, without code. So I can make this as beginner friendly as possible. So yeah, let's get into it. Okay, let's start with the geometry so we can build everything inside, and the base shape will be a tube. I want to set the columns to 32 to have enough geometry, and I'm also going to decrease the height to 0.8. This is in meters, and the rest will be fine like this. So 0.8, yeah. Now let's create a null, and this will be our base shape. From here we will extract some geometry to build out the remaining parts. So let's create in here a dot by pressing Alt and creating a group, which will be group 1. You can rename it, I'm not going to bother. And I'm going to set this to points and go into include by edges, unshared, and create boundary groups. And this will divide each unshared points, in this case by 2, so we can manipulate both. So in this case, let me see. Yeah, I don't think I need that, because I can just do unshared edges in this case, but we will do that later. So let's convert line. In this case we don't need, because it will be easier to separate them. So if we do now a split, and since we have one that is 0, we can just set it here to 0, and it will output both the primitive 0 and 1. So yeah, we can work this way. So in this case I want to invert the selection here, because I want first the bottom to create the spherical shape below. So for that I'm going to create a polyfill. You can create a sphere and cut it, but I'm just going to try to be as continuous as possible with the geometry, always reusing parts. So you can understand a bit better of the procedural workflow. So I'm going to set this to quadrilateral grid, that's a mouthful, and I'm going to start to play with this surface offset. And let me see what sorts of values did I use in here. So I'm gonna reduce this to -3 point something, and then I'm gonna just try to spherize it as possible. So something like this. Spherize it, is that a word? I don't know. Spherify it? I don't know. Well, anyways. Now we can output the patch group and just blast everything that is not that that patch group, because right now in here we also have the curve yet still. So let's blast and keep just the patch. Now we can reverse these. So we have something like this, and we can subdivide it. Just one is fine. Now for this one, I want to scale it a bit up to create the cone at the top. So for that I'm gonna create a transform. And in the pivot I need to enter centroid. I have a preset in here in my recipes, centroid. You just need to write these expressions in here, so it scales from the center. Otherwise it will scale from the world center, and it will move the geometry. So I'm gonna scale it by 1.15. That's enough. Now I want to duplicate this shape and move it up and scale it to 0, so I can create the cone shape. For that, first of all, I'm going to use the node enumerate, so I can have an ID. I'm going to set this to points. This just creates an ID on our geometry using the point number, the index. Then I'm going to copy and transform, and I'm going to move it by 0.5 and scale it to 0. But as you can see, it's not scaling from the center, so we need to do the same in here. So centroid 0 dx, or you can input just 0 also. dy, I'm more used to this, and dz. So now it's coming from the center. I just want to set it to 0. And now we still have that attribute on our points, and now it's getting duplicated. So if we now do an add by group and do by attribute and enter index, which is the name of that attribute, we create the geometry. Now I can blast this geometry in here, but let's just test without it. So if we create a skin, yeah, it will create some problems. So we need to create a blast. And first of all, I'm gonna output the copy num in here. So that will look something like this. So, and we need to blast the primitive 0 or the ID 0. So for that, I'm gonna say add copy num is equal to 0. And if we set it to primitives, no, copy num bigger than 0. And we set this to points. So let me test something in here. Am I saying this correctly? So copy num, and this is on primitives. This should blast. So let me actually see what's going on. Marker. So let copy num is equal to 0. So that will work. Sorry about that. And now we can just skin this and it will work just fine. And in this case, this is creating too much geometry. Let me see. So let me just do VRAP to 1. So yeah, in here we need to do bigger or equals to 0. So it removes also any other primitive, and now we can do a skin with VRAP 1. I was confused, sorry about that. Now we have some overlapping points in here, so if we use those, and we do, maybe, let's see, right now we have this normal issue, so we can do a soften normals, and that will fix it. Maybe we can reduce this, but it's fine. So let's see what we've accomplished so far. If we select one node and another one and merge it, we have this. And if we merge in here, this one with this one, we have something like this. And we can take this off normals from here and paste it in and do it in here. So this is our base shape. So now we're going to create the platform. For that, I'm going to select this node in here and create an object merge with it, or you can just type object merge and drag this in. I just do it this way because I have shared the script before about it. You can look it on my channel. So here we have the curve, and we can polyfill it, and it will be just a single polygon, and we still have the curve, so we, instead of outputting the patch group, we can just blast the primitive 0. It will always be 0, the curve. At least I think so. And now we can transform it, and in this case we want to scale it up by 1.2, and again from the centroid. As you can see, it's moving the centroid in here, and I'm gonna scale it to 1.2. Let's create a null. And now we're going to, let's see what makes sense to do first. I'm gonna create in here a group by range and select a few points. I'm gonna divide these into sections. So right now we have 32 points, so we can do points and do one and copy from the tube the columns, and we can do paste relative reference. This will just select one. Let me increase that for you. So geometry, marker, guides, point size, point marker size. So as you can see, it's just selecting one. And I want to divide this into, let's say, 16 sections. So we get, or we can just do, in this case, we don't need that. We can just, but this is useful because you can come in here and divide it into 4, as you can see, or divide it into 8. But in this case, we can just do 1 out of 2. That's fine. I'm now reviewing my own file. And then we can blast, just keep those points. So let's delete non-selected, and let's name this range. Let's select in here range, and let's do an add. delete geometry, but keep points. Now we want to create the vertical lines in here. So for that, I'm gonna create first of all an ID. So let's create an ID with an enumerate, and let's set it to points. And now we can copy and transform and move this up. So in this case by point 2. And let's create an add node and by group. And we need to set it by attributes and index, and it will create the geometry. So we also want to create, we can actually just sweep this to have some geometry. So let's set this to square 2, and I'm gonna scale it to 0.012. And we will see that this is not oriented properly, but we will fix it in a bit. Let's now focus on creating the remaining geometry. So from this null in here, I'm gonna create a dot with alt and create another null. And let's create a copy. So copy and transform. And we can actually copy from here. So copy this or create a reference copy and paste. And I'm gonna split this right away. And I can split the primitive 0. Let's create a null and another null to visualize the outputs. Now in here, I just want to do a sweep. And let's name this top and bottom. And let's create a sweep, and this can be around 2. Let me see the thickness. So in this case, I'm gonna set it to square 2, 2 columns, and a thickness of 0.017. And now for the bottom, we can just create a thicken, and I'm gonna use in this case a value. I'm gonna use the value of the same sweep we have in here, so this one. So let's copy this and let's paste it in here. So now we have this geometry and we can start to merge everything. So pressing Alt after selecting the nodes, and now we can actually select this one and drag down, and here we have the platform. Now as you can see, this is poking a bit out, so we actually need to extrude this shape a little bit. So for that, I'm going in here and create the unshared edges. This is just from labs, so I'm gonna get the unshared edges and I'm gonna extrude, and I'm gonna extrude the unshared and by the same amount of this sweep. So let's copy this and paste, and I just want to do half of it because the sweep will create geometry from the center. So just in case, I think I change in here this also to 2. We don't need that much geometry. So as you can see, now we have some breathing space in here, both below and above. And yeah, that's our platform done. Let's move on. So before we move on, there's still some things I want to do in this platform to create in here a cross geometry along these divisions. And also, as you can see, this is not oriented properly, so around the circle. And we need to create some normals or an up attribute pointing outwards. So this will involve just a little expression, and we can actually take advantage of a preset. So let me see where I have that geometry in here. And we can create it after the add, I think. So after the enumerate, for example, let's create a point in this case, an attribute expression. And we want to set this to, let me see, spherify n. And if we have a look at that, we need to set this to normal. And as you can see, we have the normals pointing outwards, but we don't want the normals. We just want to set this to custom and up. And now we should have an up attribute pointing outwards. And if we copy add, we should still have that up attribute, as you can see, and it's working great. And now we can sweep, and if we have a look at the final results, we now have the geometry oriented properly, as you can see. So because this sweep node reads that up attribute to orient the primitives, and we will play with it in a bit later, or another piece. So now we want to create some cross geometry in here, and without over complicating too much, we can use again the sweep node. So let's actually do that. Let me just organize it in here, and let's take this geometry from here, and I'm going to transform it. And what am I going to do? I'm going to translate it up by 0.1, and I'm going to convert line to make this a line, or you can use edge group to curve. And oh, not group one, sorry, I just want one, a single one. And now we can do a sweep, but in this case we want to set this to round tube, I believe. Let me see in here. Yeah, round tube and 2 columns, and we want to set this to just output columns. As for the radius, I'm gonna scale it to 0.089 because the value I found worked well. And now comes the trick, where we can come in here, and in the partial twist we're gonna set it to 180, and we're going to scale it per edge. And now we just need to roll this 90. And as you can see, we have that cross geometry that we can now sweep. And I think I use round shape in here. So let me just check here. No, in this case, square tube to the 2 columns and 0.007. And let's merge that in. And now we have that geometry, as you can see. So that is fine. Now let's see what's next. So now we're going to complicate a bit, because I want you, if you're still a beginner, I want you to learn about other things. So I want to select this point so I can extrude a pole down, like I want to create some geometry below, and for that I want to extract this point procedurally. So we can go back where we created that geometry. So in here, let's create a null. And what we will do in here, we can run a detail VOP, since we just want 1 point. So we just want to run these ones. And from this geometry, you can get the bounding box. So bounding box. And from there, we can just create a near point function. So near point. And we can feed this into here. And we want to select the mean as pos. And if we output that as a group or as a point, so bind export, and this will output a detail attribute, and we can name it point. And if we have a look at that, oh, not here, so let's have a look at that point, and we need to enable this. As you can see, it will be 126, and what we need is the number 56. So we need to manipulate here the y position. So for that, instead of doing a vector to float and float to vector to set the component x and z to 0, we can do a simple snippet. So this will be easier. And we want to manipulate this. So let's do min. It will be equal to set the vector component, and we set the x to 0.0. The y can be the mean bounding box dot y, and then we can set the z to 0. So if we output that, now as you can see, we will have the point 56, which is the bottommost point, let's say. So let me see, do we have an error? Oh no, that's fine. And let's merge this and continue working below. So let me see in here. Now we want to blast that point. So let me just not visualize it. Now let's do a blast. And we want to work on points. And let's open this backtick and do detail 0 point, which is the attribute, and the component 0. And we get that single point in there. From here, we need to create the curve, which will be another exercise we need to figure out how to do. So let's do a point VOP. We can easily create a line and all that kind of thing, but I'm going to complicate just a little bit so we can continue working on the same geometry. So we have this point. Now we want to add another point below so we can create a line. So for that, I'm going to take the current point position and add, and I'm going to add a constant along a vector. So I'm going to set this to vector, and I'm going to set, I want to add along the negative y. I'm also going to multiply constants so I can increase the distance. And if I do this, it will move just a point down, but I don't want to do that. I want to keep the same position, so I'm gonna get this position and add this. And from here, we can just do an add point. So add point to create that point below. And as you can see, we have that point there. I'm gonna set this to 1.4 was the value I used. And now we can come in here, create an add, and just do by group, and that will work. But let's try to do this within VOPs. So we want to add a primitive, which is a line, so add prim, and we also need to add vertex, and we need 2 of those. So the prim num connects to the prim, and the point number, the first one will be the point number, and the second one will be this point, and there we have the curve. So that is fine. Now let's move down and do a simple resample. This will subdivide the curve, and I'm going to set it to 0.04. Let's do a sweep and set it to round tube. And in this case, let me see what sorts of settings did I use. So I'm going to set a radius of 0.08. 12 columns will be fine, and the rest, I don't want to touch it. And from here, we can subdivide this. And I'm going to subdivide it, let's say by 2, and later we can work on it. And now I want to create some pattern on this. So for that, again, I'm going to use a point VOP, and this will be a bit more elaborated, but nothing too complicated. So we can create a point VOP, and let's say we do a bind export to export an attribute, and let's name this U, or curve U. And I'm going to do a relative point bounding box, take the position, and I'm gonna get components, get vector components, and I'm just interested in the y, and I'm gonna output this in here. So if we go back and visualize that, as you can see, it will be a value from 0 to 1 from that relative point bounding box, 0 and 1 at the top, and everything in between. So now we want to manipulate this value to create some details. For that, first of all, we need to, in order to repeat this attribute along the curve, we can do the following. We can take this output, create a multiply, and create a constant in here. And let's say how many repetitions you want. Let's say 60. Now we just need to modulo by 1, so it wraps around. And now it will repeat. But we will need more geometries for this. So something like this. And let's see, did I set it to 60? Yes. And now we can just create a ramp to control this. So ramp parameter, and I'm gonna set it to spline ramp. And don't worry about that, because we can go back and just set it to linear again, and we will manipulate that ramp. I also want to move this along the normal. So I want to manipulate the position, so let's get the position and create an add. And I want to move it by this, but I also want to move it along the normal, so the normals are pointing outwards. So I'm gonna take the normals and multiply them by this mask and add it to the position. So we will get something like this. And now we need to create in here a constant, and we can tweak the amount it displays. And we also need a normal afterwards. So let's add a normal. Let's set this to 0.0, let me see, 0.0039. And now we need to manipulate that ramp. And I think we have everything in here. We need to go back and manipulate that ramp. And this will be pretty simple. We're just gonna set this to hill and make sure we set it to B-spline. And we get this sort of detail, which is nice. So let's merge these. Let's select this one and this one. Oops. This one and this one. And press Alt and drag. And we already have some detail in there. Just to finish it off, I'm gonna grab this resample in here, create a null, and create some detail in here. So in this case, I'm gonna carve, and I'm gonna carve this on the second view and set this to 0.15, 0.15, just to extract that particular shape in there. I'm gonna resample it again. So resample. And I'm gonna set this to 0.03. I'm gonna move it up a little bit because I know it will be, I will be needing this transform, and I'm just going to sweep to round 2. And now let's look at these in context. If we enable this with Control or just by pressing E, it's not E, it's W, yeah. And we can visualize that. As you can see, I had to move that up to close the shape in there. And I'm gonna set in here the radius. First of all, the columns to 24 to have more geometry. Radius of 0.14. And I'm just going to manipulate the shape in here. Let me try to get something similar to what I got. So B-spline, oops, B-spline. Gonna set one in here. Gonna move this one down to something like this. Move one in here. And this one in here. So something like this, maybe. Maybe let's move this a bit in. So I don't want to worry too much about it. You can always play with it. And yeah, this is what we got so far. I think we need to create the truss and then the ladder. Let's do that next. So now we want to create some supporting geometry in here. And for that, I'm going to merge in, let me see, is this one? No. Let's just go up and create another object merge, Control X. And let's also move this one in here and create a null. And let's paste this null in here. Now we want to select 4 points for the start of the supporting geometry. So let's create a range. And I'm gonna select points, go up, and copy this column so it remains procedural. I'm gonna paste this in here. This will just select the first point. And I'm gonna divide this by 4. And I also want to offset it. So I'm gonna copy this and paste. And divide this by 2. So it offsets something like this to create like a square. So that's simple enough. Now I'm gonna create in here a group of the unshared points. So points, include by edges, unshared edges, and create boundary groups. Now we can group promote, and we want to extract the bottom one. So let's do 1 and promote to edges and tick this box. Let's convert line, and let's convert that line. And now, as you can see, we still have that point group. If you can see it in here, we still have that point group, so we can blast that specific point group, so it's group 1, and add to remove the primitives. And now we need to do the same we did above to create the line and just move the points down, but this time with a twist. So let's do a point VOP, and we can name this, but I'm not going to even bother. So let's go inside, and what we'll do here, so if we now take the current point position and just do an add point, we will just have points on top of each other. As you can see, we want to move them down, so for that I'm gonna set in here vector components, get vector component. Is this one? No. Let's see, component, set vector component. Yeah, this one. It's been a while since I played with VOPs. I just did this for this video, maybe to try something different. And in this case we want to set the Y, and let's do a constant in here. Let's set this to -2, and if we do that we have the points below, but I don't want to set this negative value, so I'm gonna just place a negate afterwards and it will move them down. This way we can just increase or decrease, and you can totally promote these parameters and work from outside. That's even better, but in this case I'm just going to continue. And now I don't want them like this parallel, I want them to go outwards. So for that, what I'm going to do is to take this vector pointing down, and I'm gonna normalize it. And if I do that, as you can see, they will move inwards. And if I do multiply constant, and I start to play with this, as you can see, I can move them down. So let's say 2 in here, and in here is not 2, is, so it is, am I doing add constant? Just a constant. Sorry, I made a mistake in here. We want actually to add this to the point position. So add this to the point position, and now we can manipulate how much it goes down and how much it opens or wraps around. So in this case I'm going to set it to 2 and 2, and from here we can actually create the curves. So let's do an add prim, and we want to add vertex, and the first one will connect in here and duplicate this, connect the point number in here to here, and connect this one in here. That's fine. Now, in order to orient this properly, we also need an app attribute. So for that, I'm gonna just normalize the position, I think, and set it to 0. So I'm gonna copy this in here, and instead of setting a value, I'm just gonna set it to 0. In this case, component 2, and now I'm gonna normalize it. And if I bind export, and let's name the, and let's connect in here, set this to vector and up. Let's have a look at that. So up, as you can see, it will be pointing out. If we didn't do this, it will point in the direction from the origin. So now, as you can see, the other points don't have the attribute, and we need that, so we can do a set attribute, and we will set a vector attribute. Geometry and all is fine on the point. So we want to set the up, and the point is this one, the value is this one, and we can also set the vertex. It doesn't make a difference in this case, but yeah, this is working fine. We have the attribute. Now we can resample this. And let me set this to be, in this case, 10 segments. It will be fine. This will define the amount of struts we have, or truss we have. And now we can do a simple sweep. Let's set this to round tube and 3 columns, and also set it to columns only. Is it oriented properly? I don't think so. And I think we need, let's first of all decrease the scale, and we need to rotate them, so we need to roll by 90, and now they will be pointing out, so that's fine. Now let's do another sweep. In this case, set it to round tube, and the radius can be just 0.01. Now let's go to create the struts. So I'm gonna copy this one and make sure I copy the amount of columns, and I copy the radius. And now we can come down and copy this parameter, and here in the partial twist we're gonna do 360 divided by the amount of columns. So this will just twist the shapes, but we want to create that zigzag, so we will do scale by attribute, and let's create that attribute. It will be just a really simple expression using the attribute expression, and this is still VEX, but is really simple. We're just gonna set column, call it row, and I'm gonna set at ptnum modulo 2. As you can see, it will create twists in that, create that effect. Now we can simply copy this sweep and sweep it, in this case by a value of 0.00750075. Let's merge those two, and let's merge everything and see where we at. Oops. Let's create a null. Let's remove any visualization we have. And we now just need to create the ladder. Let's do that next. So for the ladder, we can copy this same one here. Let's clip it, and this will be the end of our ladder. So along Y, and we will clip it to a value of 0.1. Let's do all primitives and output the clip edges. Let's convert line, and let's select clip edges, connect as path. Let's do a group by range, and we will again select, let's say 1 of endpoints, so the amount of points we have, and let's select points, and it will be in there, so we can go up, copy again this, and paste this in here, and let's divide this by 2, and it will select that point. From here we can blast that, just blast that point, or just isolate that point, I mean. So group 1, and if we check this by pressing E, we have that point in there, as you can see. So now let's manipulate this in point pop. So this will be pretty simple. We're just going to take the position and add to it, and so now you know how to do this. Set this to vector, and I'm gonna move the first point along the negative x-axis, and also a bit down too, so 0.7, and I'm gonna multiply constant and add this in here, and add point, and the point is, I need to decrease this to about 0.172, and now I'm just going to duplicate this and this also, and this one I'm just going to move it down, so 0 minus 1, 0 minus 1, and I'm gonna move it from that point So as you can see now it's moving there, and I'm gonna scale this by 2.3. So quite a bit down, and that's it. Now we're just going outside and create an ad and do this by group, and there we have our letter or the beginnings. Now where it makes sense to do this next, so let's do in here sweep. I'm gonna set this to ribbon. Let's see how that looks. So it's oriented the other way around. Let's set this to Y, and I'm gonna set this to 1, and set this to columns, and just create a sweep round 2, round 2, and I just need to decrease these by about 0.015. Now in the other side, I'm gonna first of all create a resample, because we don't have enough points. Default settings will be fine. It's a nice spacing. Let's do a sweep, and I'm gonna set this to ribbon again. We can just copy from here, so set this to ribbon, but instead of columns we'll set it to rows, and copy the width from here. And let's just do another sweep. I can copy this one, but this time 0.01. And if we merge these, as you can see, we still have these end prims that I don't want, so I can come in here and do a blast. And let's blast primitive 0, and to blast the last one we can open the backtick and do end prims, the amount of the primitives in the incoming geometry, -1, and that will blast the last one. So let's see where we're at. And that's our ladder. Now, just as a bonus, I'm gonna do a texture projection in here, and we will create a logo to project in there. So let's do that next. So instead of grabbing a logo online, we're just going to create one. So for that, I'm gonna create a copnet. Gonna name this logo. And first of all, we're going to need we're going to create the font and distort a bit this shape. But for that, I'm gonna create some custom UVs. So let's do a SOP import, create a circle, and let's set these to be 64 divisions, and let's squash it by 0.5, and let's do a custom curve. Let's set this to open arc, I believe, yeah. And let's do in here a curve, and you will see in a bit where we're going with this. So 614 is the value I chose, and a value of 0.805. Let's match this so we can have some action in our loop. Let's do a resample. Sure, how much did I use in here? 0.1 is fine. Let's do a sweep. So sweep. Let's set it to ribbon. And default settings will be fine, but I want to output in here the PT call attribute, which is just an attribute that goes along the columns. So 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. And from here, I want to create, let's disable the visualization. And let's do a UV flatten. But as you can see, the UVs are not following the contours, so I'm gonna rectify the group, but now they are upside down. So what we can do is create a group in here. Let's set it to points, and at PT call is equal to 0. So or we can increase it, as you can see. I'm gonna set it to 0. Now I'm gonna group promote group 1 to vertices, and if I go into the UV flatten and enable in here the group 1, it will align better, as you can see. So let's create an output, and that's our geometry. Let's rasterize this. So rasterize setup first. Position is fine, and we're going to do bounding box and scale to fit. Rasterize geometry to get the UVs. Let's output in here the UV and set it to UV. And now we can create our logo. So I'm just going to name it, I'm gonna pick a font in here, so Calibri bold italic. I'm gonna name it Chesterfield, which is based on the reference I saw. I'm gonna scale this to 0.26. And now we can do a UV sample from this. So if we do a UV sample and select these as texture and these as our UVs, and we of course need to transform these because it's not in the correct space. So let's translate these and move again these. Let's scale this to 1.6 and maybe scale it to translate it to 0.78, negative 0.78. As you can see, we had a bit of work, but now we have this more interesting shape instead of just this one, which I like. So let's set this to 2K, that's fine. Let's create some color from this, so mono to RGB. And let's select here the white and pick some dark brown. Let's convert to PNG, so RGBA, so RGB to RGBA. Let's select this as RGB and this as alpha. Now we have transparency, as you can see. And finally, we're going to wrap output this. Let's name this logo Chester new.png. Oops, like this. Logo Chester new.png. Let's, default settings are fine. Oh, I need to connect these coppads and render to disk. So now we're going up and we're going to use a custom tool that you can have access on my Patreon. So let's do a texture projection CGS. And first of all, we need to unwrap these. There's this handy tool to unwrap cylinders from labs. Let's do the texture projection. So all good, and let's project in here, somewhere around here. And let's pick that logo. So it's in the render folder, and there we have it. Now I can scale it a little bit, maybe something like this. Let's set this to 4K. And let's create just a null. And yeah, guys, that was basically it. So I don't know how many of you follow to the end, but I still want to manipulate this. I want to move this a bit up. So maybe that's better. Let's see. Yeah, that's better. So I don't know how many of you followed to the end, but please let me know in the comments if you did and if you enjoyed this one. As always, you can grab this projection tool on my Patreon alongside with hours and hours of exclusive tutorials, all the project files from my videos, including this one. And yeah, if you want to support my work, consider supporting me on Patreon. Thank you for watching, and I guess I'll see you next time. Thank you.